Today we begin the book of Nehemiah, which, though it is a separate book in our Bibles, it was part of the same scroll as the book of Ezra originally. So we don't have to spend much time setting the scene. We all know what's going on in the book of Nehemiah because it's the same as what was happening in Ezra. Over in Jerusalem, an attempt is being made by the remnant of Israel to rebuild their civilization, to rebuild their temple, and then to repopulate the city and recommit themselves to God. And on every single count, their efforts have fallen somewhat short. This book begins about 15 years after the book of Ezra ends, and we're about to see that not much progress has been made in the meantime. In this first chapter, we're introduced to a man called Nehemiah. He is a Jew, but he's high up in government. He has a position of power in Persia. He is, as the last verse of the chapter tells us, he is cupbearer to the king. This was a vital position in the ancient world because one of the easiest ways to kill a king would be to simply slip poison into his drink. And these kings had no shortage of rivals and opponents, both inside and outside the kingdom. So it's a position of privilege and influence and access to the king, and it's held by a man called Nehemiah, who is a man of God. One day, Nehemiah gets a visit from his brother. You see that in verse 2. Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, "Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. It is a city without walls, which means that it is open and vulnerable to its enemies." Do you remember the amount of gold and silver and precious stones that were used in the construction of Solomon's temple? Well, it's no wonder that this one pales in comparison, because any effort to kind of beautify this place would make it an absolute magnet for danger. And it's danger that they cannot fend off without walls. Nehemiah says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." We have a snapshot of this prayer in the rest of the chapter. This is a really beautiful and helpful prayer. Notice, in the first instance, he honors God. As he comes before him in prayer, he recognizes that he is speaking to the God of heaven, who is the great and awesome God. Then Nehemiah confesses the sins of his people. Again, there's no evidence that Nehemiah himself is guilty of these sins, but you see how closely he identifies with his people. This is just like Ezra in Ezra chapter 9. Here, Nehemiah says, "I confess the sins that we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses." There is no mincing of words here. There is no, "Oh, but Lord, you don't understand my particular circumstances." There is no, "Let me give you my reasons for why I'm actually not nearly as bad as I appear." No, Nehemiah tells it straight, doesn't he? He calls it sin. Now, he does not propose that the solution will be found in trying harder and doing better. No, for the solution, he turns to God. "Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, 'If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name.'" This is glorious, isn't it? Do you remember what the problem was that his brother reported to him? The city has got no wall. But Nehemiah's focus is not on bricks and gates and bars. His focus is on the faithfulness of God. "God, if you are on our side, nothing can stand against us. If you are not with us, then the laborers work in vain. So Lord God, we need you." Nehemiah's focus is exactly right. But like the best examples of faithful followers that we've seen throughout the Bible, Nehemiah does not simply pray, but he marries together prayer and practice. Nehemiah has a plan. He will take action, but the path has been paved with prayer. There's a lot that we can learn from this opening chapter. We can start by observing this. Whatever problems we are facing in the world, they are as a result of sin. The sin of ourselves, the sin of others, everything that is wrong in the world is as a result of sin. And the best, wisest, most humble starting point is to recognize that you yourself are not separate from the sin of the world. You have added to it, and you need to be rescued from it. Correctly identifying the cause of the problem is Nehemiah's first wise step. And then he correctly identifies the solution. He turns his heart towards and he puts his hope into the living God. I wonder if we are so quick to put our hope in the same place. Or do we put our hope in governments or innovations or one perfectly worded conversation? Then Nehemiah says, if there's any hope to be found here, our hope is found in you. And finally, he's both prayerful and practical. He has a plan, and we'll see it in the coming chapters as he prays with diligence for his plans to succeed.